A mugger confronts the millionaire, and tension erupts in seconds until a small figure appears to change everything. The street girl he fed every day becomes his unexpected protector. This act of courage not only saves his life, but drags him into a fight against hidden and dangerous forces. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. Winter in Boston was particularly harsh that year. The biting wind swept through the financial district, carrying whispers of snow that would soon blanket the city. Robert Mitchell pulled his cashmere coat tighter around his shoulders as he left the gleaming glass tower of Mitchell Innovations. Another successful quarter, another billion added to the company's valuation, yet the emptiness inside him remained unchanged. At 45, Robert had everything society deemed valuable: a penthouse overlooking the Charles River, a collection of luxury cars, investments spanning 3 continents, and the respect that came with being a self-made tech magnate. What he lacked, however, couldn't be purchased: genuine human connection. As he did every evening, Robert walked the 4 blocks to where his driver waited with his Bentley. He could have had the car brought directly to the building's entrance, but this short walk had become a sacred ritual over the past 6 months, a ritual that involved someone special. Near the corner of Franklin and Devonshire, in the shadow of an old brownstone, he spotted her. Lily, that's what she called herself, couldn't have been more than 11 years old. Her dirty blonde hair was tucked under a faded Red Sox cap, her small frame drowning in layers of mismatched clothes. Despite the hardship written on her young face, her blue eyes held a spark of intelligence that had caught Robert's attention the first time they met. "Evening, Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice carrying a slight southern drawl that hinted at a life lived elsewhere before Boston's streets became her home. "Good evening, Lily," he replied, reaching into his briefcase for the carefully packed meal he had asked his personal chef to prepare. Tonight it was chicken pot pie, still warm in its insulated container, along with an apple, a chocolate bar, and a bottle of water. Their exchange was brief, as always. No questions about why she was on the streets instead of in school or with family. No offers to call social services. Robert had tried once early on, and the terror in her eyes had told him everything he needed to know. Some systems designed to help could hurt worse than the streets themselves. "The Celtics won last night," Lily said, accepting the food with practiced dignity. This wasn't charity in her mind. It was an exchange. She offered small talk, weather, updates, or occasionally a drawing she had made on discarded paper. Robert had several of these simple artworks framed in his office, though none of his executives knew their origin. "Did they?" "I missed the game," he answered, though he had watched every minute of it in his home theater. These small lies maintained the fiction that their relationship was casual, that he wasn't increasingly concerned about the child, who refused more substantial help. Triple overtime. You should have seen Williams block that last shot. It was epic. She demonstrated with her free hand, mimicking the defensive move with unexpected grace. Robert smiled genuinely, the first real smile of his day. "Maybe I'll catch the highlights tonight." As they parted ways, Robert felt the familiar tug of conflicting emotions. The business strategist in him knew their arrangement solved nothing in the long term. The human in him, the part he often had to suppress in boardrooms, couldn't walk away from the small good he could do. "Stay warm," he called back to her, the same parting words he used every night. "Always do," came her standard reply, already digging into the food as she retreated into her chosen doorway. Back in his car, Robert scrolled through emails as his driver, Marcus, navigated through evening traffic. The familiar rhythm of business problems washed over him: acquisition offers to review, product launches to approve, competitors to outmaneuver. None of it felt as important as the brief exchange he'd just had. "Different route tonight, sir?" Marcus asked, noting Robert's distraction. "No, why?" "You seemed lost in thought maybe you wanted to make a stop." Robert shook his head. "Just the usual way home, Marcus." What Robert didn't say was that his thoughts remained with Lily. He had asked discreet questions around the neighborhood, careful inquiries that wouldn't attract attention. The picture he'd pieced together was troubling. Lily had appeared in Boston about a year ago, apparently alone, She was clever about avoiding authorities and had carved out a precarious existence in one of America's most expensive cities. She occasionally did small jobs for local businesses, sweeping sidewalks or running errands, but refused anything that might require documentation or official notice. Back at his penthouse, Robert shed his businessman persona like a snake, shedding skin. The jacket and tie were replaced with comfortable clothes, the polished Oxford shoes with soft slippers. He moved through the vast minimalist space with a glass of bourbon in hand, finally settling in his study, a warm room lined with books that represented his one true indulgence beyond business. On his desk sat a manila folder. Inside were photos of Lily taken discreetly by a private investigator he had hired, not to track her, but to ensure she was safe during the hours he couldn't see her. The investigator's reports painted a resourceful child who knew how to navigate the streets, but also one in constant danger from the elements, from predatory adults, and from a system that might separate her from whatever family she might still have. Robert had built his fortune by solving complex problems, finding innovative solutions where others saw only obstacles. Yet here was a problem he couldn't solve with money alone. Legally adopting Lily would require finding her family, understanding why she was on the streets, involving authorities that might ultimately place her somewhere worse. And frankly, what did he know about raising a child? His own childhood had been marked by emotional neglect, with parents too focused on appearances and social standing to notice their son's loneliness. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths had crossed for a reason. As snow began to fall outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, Robert made a decision. He would increase his efforts to help Lily, but on her terms. Trust had to come first. Tomorrow he would bring her not just food but a prepaid phone, a lifeline she could use if she ever found herself in danger. It was a small step, but perhaps the beginning of something more substantial. What Robert couldn't know as he finally drifted to sleep that night was how dramatically his life would change in the next 24 hours. How a simple act of kindness would spiral into a series of events that would test his courage, his influence, and his understanding of what truly matters in life. Across the city, Lily huddled under a bridge, wrapped in the emergency blanket Robert had given her weeks ago. Her backpack served as her pillow, containing everything she owned in the world, including a small notebook where she meticulously recorded her observations of the man who fed her. Not out of suspicion, but out of wonder. In her short life, Lily had learned that generosity usually came with strings attached. Mr. Mitchell's kindness remained the exception she couldn't quite understand. As the temperature dropped, Lily's thoughts drifted to warmer places, to memories of Tennessee summers and her grandmother's kitchen, to the life she had lost and the reasons she could never go back. Boston wasn't home, but it was a hiding place, and for now, that had to be enough. Neither Robert nor Lily could have imagined how their carefully maintained distance would collapse the very next evening, or how the simple act of protection would forever bind their destinies together. The following evening arrived with an unnatural stillness. The snow had stopped, leaving Boston encased in a pristine white shell that muffled the usual urban cacophony. Robert left work earlier than usual, the prepaid phone securely tucked in his coat pocket alongside Lily's dinner, beef stew this time with cornbread on the side. His mind was preoccupied with the quarterly board meeting scheduled for the following week. Mitchell Innovations was on the verge of acquiring a smaller tech firm specializing in artificial intelligence, a move that would position them at the forefront of a technological revolution. Yet, as he walked the familiar route, financial projections and market analyses faded from his thoughts. Instead, he found himself wondering if Lily would accept the phone, if she'd use it, if it would make any difference at all. The street corner where they usually met was empty. Robert checked his watch, 6:15 p.m., their regular time. Lily was never late. In fact, she was typically waiting for him, sometimes pretending to be casually passing by, rather than admit she'd been there for half an hour. Concern fluttered in his chest as he scanned the surrounding area. "Looking for someone?" The voice came from behind him, startling him. Lily emerged from a different alleyway than usual, her posture tense. "You changed spots," Robert observed, trying to keep his toned casual, while noting the dark circles under her eyes. "Everything okay?" Lily shrugged, her eyes darting to the shadows across the street. "Just mixing things up. Keeps life interesting." As Robert handed her the food container, he noticed her knuckles were scraped raw. "What happened to your hands?" "Nothing. Important." She tucked them quickly into her pockets. "Thanks for dinner." Robert hesitated, then pulled out the prepaid phone. "I got you something else. It's just a basic phone already. Activated with 6 months of service. My number is programmed in." Lily stared at the device as if it might bite her. "Why?" "In case you need help. No strings attached. You don't even have to call me. There's emergency services, hotlines for youth." "I don't need to be saved, Mr. Mitchell," she interrupted. But her hand reached for the phone nonetheless. After examining it carefully, she slipped it into her jacket pocket. "But thanks, I guess it could come in handy." Robert was about to respond when the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Years of business negotiations had honed his instinct for trouble, and right now those instincts were screaming. Turning slightly, he spotted a figure lurking near his parked Bentley, half hidden in the shadows between street lamps. "I should go," he said quietly to Lily. "You should too, different directions." But it was too late. The figure had spotted them and was moving with purpose, a man in his 30s, unshaven, wearing a worn leather jacket that had seen better days. His walk had the erratic energy of someone either high or desperate, possibly both. "Get behind me," Robert whispered to Lily, but to his surprise, she had already vanished from his side. Smart girl, he thought. At least she was safe. Robert continued walking toward his car, hoping the man would lose interest or be deterred by Marcus's presence. But his driver had stepped away, probably getting coffee from the shop around the corner, a habit Robert had never discouraged during these brief stops. "Hey, suit," the man called out, his voice carrying the rough edge of someone who'd been smoking too many cigarettes for too many years. "Got a minute for a working man?" Robert had learned long ago that ignoring confrontation often escalated it. He stopped, maintaining a careful distance. "Can I help you?" The man's smile revealed yellowed teeth. "Yeah, you can help me. Nice watch you got there. Patek Philippe, right? Probably worth more than I make in 5 years. Robert's hand instinctively moved to cover his watch, a gift from his board of directors on the company's 10th anniversary. "I don't want any trouble." "Nobody ever does," the man replied, closing the distance between them with alarming speed. "But trouble finds us anyway, doesn't it? Like how the economy tanked and I lost my job, my apartment, everything. Meanwhile, guys like you just keep getting richer." There was a desperate intelligence in the man's eyes that made him more dangerous than a common thief. This was someone who had once had something to lose. "I understand times are hard," Robert Hay said, calculating his options. His car was still 20 feet away. Marcus was nowhere in sight. "I can give you some money, no questions asked." "Oh, I'm sure you can," the man sneered, pulling something from his pocket. The streetlight glinted off metal, not a gun, Robert realized with partial relief, but a knife. "But I think I'll take the watch too. And whatever's in that fancy briefcase, consider it wealth redistribution." Robert had taken self-defense classes at his security team's insistence, but theory and practice were worlds apart. As the man lunged forward, Robert stumbled backward, his heel catching on an uneven part of the sidewalk. He fell against his car, the impact knocking the wind from his lungs. The man was on him in an instant, the knife now pressed against his ribs. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he hissed, his breath reeking of alcohol. Time seemed to slow as Robert felt the pressure of the blade through his expensive coat. In this moment, all his wealth, his influence, his carefully constructed empire meant nothing. He was just a man facing the random cruelty of the world, no different from anyone else. Then came a sound, a whoosh of air followed by a solid thunk. The pressure of the knife disappeared as the man howled in pain, dropping to his knees. Standing behind him, gripping a battered baseball bat with both hands, was Lily, her face a mask of fierce determination. "Run!" she shouted at Robert, already backing away herself. The man turned his rage toward the child, lunging to grab her leg. You little... Lily swung again, catching him in the shoulder. The blow wasn't powerful enough to cause serious injury, but it gave Robert the opening he needed. He scrambled to his feet and grabbed Lily's arm, pulling her toward the main street where there would be witnesses, people, safety. "My car," he gasped, but Lily shook her head violently. Too slow. "This way." She tugged him down an alley he would never have entered alone, her small feet sure on the icy ground where his leather shoes slipped and slid. Behind them, the man was getting to his feet, his face contorted with pain and fury. "I'll find you," he shouted after them. "Both of you, nobody does this to me," and walks away. Lily led Robert through a maze of back streets and service, alleys until they emerged near a busy restaurant district. Only then did she slow down, her breath coming in white puffs in the cold air. The baseball bat, which Robert now noticed was cracked along its length, was still clutched in her hand. "Are you hurt?" Robert asked, scanning her for injuries while trying to catch his breath. Lily shook her head. "I'm fine. You're the one who almost got stabbed." She looked up at him with an expression that mixed concern with something like disappointment. "Why didn't you fight back?" The question caught Robert off guard. I don't know. It happened so fast." "You gotta be ready," Lily said with the world-weary wisdom of someone far beyond her years. "People like that, they smell fear. They look for the ones who won't fight back." Robert stared at the child before him, seeing her truly for the first time. Not as an object of charity or pity, but as a person of remarkable courage and resilience. "Where did you get the bat?" he asked. "Found it in a dumpster behind Fenway last summer. Been keeping it with my stuff." She examined the crack in the wood with a frown. "Probably won't last much longer now." The implications of her words hit Robert like a physical blow. This child carried a weapon because she had to, because the world had taught her that no one else would protect her. While he had been worrying about market shares and investment portfolios, Lily had been fighting daily battles just to survive. "Thank you," he said finally, the words entirely inadequate. "You saved my life." Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "How you feed me every day, figured I owed you one." A police siren wailed in the distance, and Lily tensed immediately. Robert understood. For kids on the street, police could represent as much danger as protection. "We should report what happened," he said gently. "You can if you want," Lily replied, already backing away. "I'm going to disappear for a while. That guy meant what he said. He'll be looking for us." "Wait," Robert called as she turned to leave. "Where will you go? How will I find you?" Lily tapped her pocket where she'd stashed the phone. "I've got this now, remember? I'll call you when it's safe." Before Robert could protest, she was gone, slipping between two buildings, with the practiced ease of someone who knew every hiding place in the city. He stood alone on the sidewalk, his expensive coat torn, his watch still on his wrist, his life forever changed. When Marcus finally found him 30 minutes later, frantically combing the streets after finding the empty Bentley, Robert was sitting in a coffee shop, staring into space. His hands had finally stopped shaking enough to call his driver. "Sir, what happened? Are you all right?" Marcus's normally composed demeanor had given way to genuine concern. "I'm fine," Robert replied, though nothing could be further from the truth. Physically, he was unharmed. Mentally, he was reeling from a profound shift in his understanding of the world and his place in it. "Should I call the police? Your security team?" Robert considered the question carefully. Official reports would mean publicity. Publicity might scare Lily away for good, especially if she thought authorities would be looking for her too. "No," he decided. "Take me home. I need to think." As the Bentley glided through Boston's streets, Robert looked out at the city with new eyes. Behind the gleaming facades of prosperity lay shadows he had chosen not to see. In those shadows lived people like Lily, and people like the man who had attacked him, both victims of a system that Robert had mastered and profited from without questioning its fundamental injustices. Back in his penthouse, Robert paced restlessly, checking his phone every few minutes. Would Lily actually call? And if she did, what exactly was he prepared to do about it? The questions circled in his mind as the night deepened around him, bringing no answers, only an increasingly certain conviction that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. 3 days passed without word from Lily. Robert maintained his evening routine, visiting their usual meeting spot with food that went untouched, hoping for a glimpse of her faded Red Sox cap among the crowds. Each night, he returned home with a heavier heart and increasing concern. Sleep eluded him. When he did manage to drift off, his dreams were haunted by the image of a small figure wielding a baseball bat against shadows that grew ever larger and more menacing. He woke each time with the same thought: I should have done more. On the 4th day, as a winter storm gathered strength over Massachusetts Bay, Robert cancelled his meetings and summoned his head of security to his penthouse. James Wilson had been with Mitchell Innovations since the beginning, a former military intelligence officer whose calm demeanor masked an exceptional ability to manage risk. He arrived precisely on time, as always, bearing the subtle signs of concern about this unusual home visit. You're not usually one for personal security breaches, James remarked after Robert recounted the attack, omitting Lily's involvement. Why didn't you report this immediately? Robert paced his living room, pausing to stare out at the darkening sky. Because it's complicated. There's someone else involved. Someone I need to protect. James's expression remained neutral, but his posture shifted slightly. The street girl, the one you've been feeding. Robert turned sharply. You knew? It's my job to know, James replied simply. Your daily detour hasn't gone unnoticed. I've had someone keeping an eye on you from a distance. His voice softened. I didn't intervene because she seemed harmless, and it appeared important to you. Robert should have been angry at this surveillance, but instead felt only relief. Then you know she saved me. She's the reason I'm standing here. Which makes this situation even more concerning, James said. Random muggings don't usually result in threats of future retaliation. This sounds personal. It became personal when she interfered, Robert agreed. And now she's disappeared. I gave her a phone, but she hasn't called. I'm worried he found her first. James considered this. What exactly are you asking me to do, Robert? Find her. Make sure she's safe. Robert hesitated. And I want to know who this man is, why he was there, specifically targeting me. Something doesn't add up. And once we find the girl, the question hung in the air, forcing Robert to confront what he'd been avoiding. What was his end game here? What responsibility did he bear for a child he barely knew? Let's start with making sure she's alive and well, he said finally. Then we'll figure out the next step. James nodded, already typing notes into his phone. I'll need a description, any details you have about her habits, locations she frequents. I'll send you everything I know, Robert promised. And James? This stays between us for now. No police, no official channels. Understood, but Robert, James's tone grew serious. If this man is truly dangerous, we may need authorities involved eventually. After James left, Robert pulled out the file he'd compiled on Lily. It was thinner than he'd like, mostly observations and sparse facts gleaned from their brief interactions. He knew she was originally from Tennessee, had been in Boston for about a year, and possessed mathematical abilities well beyond typical for her age. She could calculate complex sums in her head faster than most adults with a calculator. Once he'd mentioned a supply chain problem his company was facing, and she'd immediately suggested an optimization solution that his team of MIT graduates had overlooked. What he didn't know was far more substantial. Her last name, her exact age, who her family was, or why she was on the streets. These gaps now seemed like dangerous blind spots rather than respectful boundaries. The storm outside intensified, wind howling between skyscrapers as the first heavy snowflakes began to fall. Robert imagined Lily seeking shelter somewhere, alone and possibly in danger because she had chosen to help him. The thought was unbearable. His phone rang, an unknown number. He answered immediately, hope surging. Mr. Mitchell? Lily's voice was barely audible over the wind noise. Lily, where are you? Are you safe? For now, she sounded exhausted. But I can't stay here much longer. The owner's getting suspicious. Tell me where. I'll come get you. A pause. You can't. He's watching your building and probably your office too. The statement sent a chill through Robert that had nothing to do with the storm. Who is? The man from the other night. Him and others. This is bigger than I thought. Her voice dropped even lower. I think they know who you are. Like, really know. Robert processed this. Lily, I have people who can help, security professionals. Let me send someone to bring you somewhere safe. Another pause, longer this time. How do I know I can trust them? You trusted me enough to call, Robert pointed out gently. That's different, She didn't finish the thought. Fine, but not your regular security. Someone nobody would connect to you. I understand. Robert was already texting James. Where are you? South Station. There's a maintenance closet near track 7. I jimmied the lock. Robert's heart sank. South Station would be crawling with transit police, especially during a storm when homeless individuals sought shelter there. Stay put. Someone will be there. Within 30 minutes, they'll knock 3 times, pause, then twice more. If they're not there in 35 minutes, I'm gone, Lily warned. And Mr. Mitchell, be careful who you trust right now. The line went dead before he could respond. James moved with impressive efficiency. Within 10 minutes, he had dispatched 2 plainclothes security specialists, a man and a woman who could pass as a couple seeking shelter from the storm. Robert paced his apartment, phone in hand, waiting for confirmation. 28 minutes after Lily's call, his phone buzzed with a message from James. Package secure. Proceeding to location Alpha. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by a new wave of anxiety. Location Alpha was a safe house Mitchell Innovations maintained for visiting executives who required discretion, foreign dignitaries, celebrities investing in the company, occasionally witnesses in corporate espionage cases. It was off the books, paid for through a series of shell companies, its existence known only to James and 3 other people in the entire organization. Robert's instinct was to go there immediately, but James's next message stopped him. Stay. Where you are, security concerns confirmed. We'll brief when situation stabilized. What had Lily seen? Who was watching him? The questions multiplied as Robert tried to make sense of what was happening. A random mugging gone wrong didn't explain this level of organization or interest in him specifically. Hours passed. The storm outside reached its peak, blanketing the city in snow that glowed orange under the streetlights. Finally, at nearly midnight, his private elevator activated. Only a handful of people had access, and James stepped into the penthouse, alone. Where is she? Robert demanded. Safe, James assured him. Better that you don't know exactly where right now. The girl was right to be cautious. There are people watching your movements. Explain, Robert ordered, pouring himself a drink with a hand that wasn't quite steady. James accepted the whiskey Robert offered. The man who attacked you, his name is Eric Donovan, former finance guy, lost everything in 2008, spent some time in prison for assault. The interesting part is who he's been associating with recently. James pulled out his tablet and showed Robert surveillance photos. This man is Calvin Weber. Officially, he runs a real estate development company. Unofficially, he's involved in various enterprises that skirt the edges of legality. Protection rackets targeting small businesses, controlling certain neighborhoods, through intimidation, that sort of thing. Robert studied the photo of a well-dressed man in his 50s, noting the expensive watch, the confident stance of someone used to power. What's his connection to Donovan? Donovan's been working for Weber's organization for about 6 months. Small-time enforcer, nothing major, until 3 days ago, when he suddenly had a private meeting with Weber himself. After that, Donovan and 2 others began surveillance on you. Robert's mind raced. I've never dealt with Weber, never even heard of him. No, but you're about to acquire Technova, which recently purchased a significant property in East Boston that Weber had his eye on. The building is currently being converted to luxury apartments, but it sits on a strategic location that would give whoever controls it significant influence in the neighborhood. So, this is about real estate? Robert asked incredulously. It's about power, James corrected. Weber's influence depends on controlling certain areas of the city. Your development would bring in different demographics, more police presence, changes he doesn't want. Robert shook his head. But why the personal attack? Why not just approach me with an offer? Men like Weber don't make offers. They solve problems before they become problems. James met Robert's eyes directly. The girl complicated things. Now Weber has to figure out who she is and what she knows. The implications hit Robert like a physical blow. She's in danger because of me. She's in danger because she chose to intervene, James countered. But yes, as long as she's connected to you, she'll be a target. Robert drained his glass, the alcohol doing little to calm the storm of emotions within him. What does she say about all this? Not much. She's remarkably self-possessed for a child, demanded to know our credentials, asked insightful questions about our security protocols. A hint of admiration crept into James's voice. She reminds me of you, actually. The comparison was unexpected. Me? Strategic thinker, doesn't trust easily, observes everything. James set down his glass. She did say one thing you should know. She believes she's seen Weber's men around the areas where street kids congregate. Says they've been recruiting homeless youth for something. For what? She doesn't know, or won't say. James looked troubled. But she's scared, Robert. Not for herself, for the other kids. Whatever's happening, it goes beyond a simple territory. Dispute. Robert stood, decision made. I need to see her. Not tonight, James said firmly. We need to establish secure protocols first. For now, we maintain the illusion that nothing has changed. You go to work tomorrow as usual. I'll arrange for additional security, discreet, but effective. And Lily. We'll keep her safe, comfortable, and out of sight. Once we better understand what we're dealing with, we can determine next steps. After James left, Robert stood at his window, watching the snow transform the city into something almost unrecognizable. Somewhere out there, a child who had saved his life was hiding because of that choice. A child who had been surviving on Boston streets while he had been living in luxury just above them. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had built a technology empire by anticipating needs, solving problems, creating solutions that changed how the world functioned. Yet he had been oblivious to the complex ecosystem of power and control operating in the very city where he lived. As dawn broke over a snow-covered Boston, Robert made a silent promise to the brave girl who had swung a baseball bat to protect a stranger. He would use every resource at his disposal to keep her safe and to understand why his path had crossed with hers in the first place. Whatever connected them was no longer just about food or charity or chance encounters. It was about justice, about challenging a system that allowed children to live on the streets, while men like Weber built empires on exploitation. About recognizing that his own success had made him complacent, blind to the suffering around him. Most of all, it was about honoring the courage of a child who had nothing yet had given everything to save him. Robert Mitchell had spent his life building things. Now he would need to learn how to fight for them. By the end of the week, Robert had established a new routine. On the surface, nothing had changed. He attended meetings, reviewed contracts, and maintained his public schedule with meticulous precision. But beneath this facade of normalcy, his world had transformed completely. Each night after his security team confirmed he wasn't being followed, Robert visited Lily at a different location. James had established a rotation of safe houses, never using the same one twice in a row, moving the girl through a carefully orchestrated pattern designed to confuse anyone attempting surveillance. Tonight's meeting place was a modest brownstone in Cambridge, owned by a retired professor who consulted occasionally for Mitchell Innovations. As Robert entered the warm living room, he found Lily curled in an armchair, absorbed in a book about advanced mathematics. "Thought you might be bored," he explained when she looked up. "I asked for some books I thought you might like." Lily's face brightened momentarily before she controlled her expression. "It's okay, the problems are too easy, though." Robert smiled, recognizing the defense mechanism: downplay enthusiasm, maintain emotional distance. He'd employed the same tactics in his early business days. I'll find something more challenging next time. Over the past few days, he'd learned more about Lily through observation than conversation. She ate methodically, as if uncertain when her next meal would come. She slept lightly, waking at the slightest noise. She showered twice daily, as if making up for months of limited access to cleanliness. And she watched everyone, calculating, assessing, planning escape routes, even in supposed safety. "Have your people found anything new?" she asked, setting aside the book. Robert settled into the chair opposite her. "James has been investigating. Weber's organization. It's more extensive than we initially thought." "I could have told you that," Lily muttered. "He has people everywhere." "What exactly do you know about him, Lily?" Robert asked gently. "You've been hinting that there's more, but you haven't shared the details." She studied him for a long moment, her young face serious beyond her years. "If I tell you, you can't go to the police. You'll just make things worse." "I promise to be careful with the information," Robert said, "but I need to understand what we're dealing with." Lily drew her knees up to her chest, making herself smaller. "They recruit kids, especially ones without homes, without anyone looking for them. They start with small stuff, delivering packages, keeping watch, reporting back about what's happening in different neighborhoods. And then it gets worse." Her voice dropped. "Some kids disappear. They say they're being sent to better places, but nobody ever hears from them again. Others start working directly for Weber's lieutenants, stealing, intimidating local businesses, even—" She hesitated. "Even what, Lily?" "Even spying on people. Like you, rich people, important people. They watch your routines, your security, everything. They call it inventory." A chill ran down Robert's spine. "Were you recruited?" "They tried." Lily's expression hardened. "I played along for a while to learn what they were doing, but I never trusted them." She met his eyes directly. "I was watching you, too, but not for them. I was trying to figure out why you were different." "Different?" "You gave without taking. Nobody does that." The simple observation cut to the heart of her worldview, a child's understanding of a system that had repeatedly failed her. "Did Weber's people know you were feeding me information about them?" Lily shook her head. "I was careful, but after what happened with Donovan," she trailed off. "They'll be looking for me now. They can't risk me talking." Robert processed this information, connecting it with what James had discovered. Weber's operation isn't just about controlling neighborhoods. It's about gathering intelligence, information he can use for leverage, blackmail, strategic advantage. "It's about controlling people," Lily corrected. "He finds what makes them vulnerable, then uses it against them." The insight was profound, especially coming from someone so young. Robert was struck again by her intelligence, wondering what circumstances had forced her to develop such acute understanding of human nature. "Lily," he said carefully, "I need to ask you something important. Are you running from someone? Is their family looking for you?" The change in her demeanor was immediate, shoulders tensing, eyes darting toward the nearest exit. "Why? Are you going to send me back?" "No," Robert assured her quickly. "I'm trying to understand the full picture, to help properly." Lily remained silent for so long that Robert thought she might refuse to answer. Finally, she spoke in a near whisper. "My mom's gone. Has been for years. My dad—" She swallowed hard. "He found new priorities. His girlfriend didn't want a kid around. They sent me to my grandmother in Tennessee." "And your grandmother?" "She got sick, really sick, the kind that doesn't get better." Lily's voice was flat, emotionless, a child's attempt at controlling unbearable pain. "Child services was coming. They were going to put me in the system. I've heard stories about foster care, so I ran." The simple tragedy of her story struck Robert with unexpected force. A child discarded by those meant to protect her, making impossible choices alone. "How long ago?" 14 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days, she answered promptly. "You've been on your own all that time? How did you survive?" A hint of pride flickered across her face. "I'm good with numbers. I can calculate odds, spot patterns. It helps. With knowing where to find food, which places are safe, who to avoid. I worked when I could, off-the-book stuff, and I traveled, made it all the way from Knoxville to Boston on less than $200. The resilience required for such a journey was staggering. While Robert had been building his empire in boardrooms, Lily had been navigating a different kind of wilderness, with nothing but her wits to guide her. "Thank you for telling me," he said, meaning it. "It helps me understand better." Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "What's your plan now? You can't keep moving me around forever." "No," Robert agreed. "We need a more permanent solution. And we need to address Weber's operation." "You can't go after him directly," Lily warned. "He has connections, police, politicians, business people." "That's what I wanted to talk to you about," Robert said, leaning forward. "James found something. Interesting. There appears to be a connection between Weber and someone at Mitchell Innovations." Lily's eyes widened. "One of your people is working with him?" "It seems that way. Financial records show unusual payments to a shell company that traces back to Weber's organization. And there have been information leaks, things only someone inside the company would know." "Who?" Robert hesitated. "We're not certain yet, but we have suspicions." He pulled out his tablet and showed her a photo. "This is Edward Blake, my CFO. He's been with the company for 8 years. Lily studied the image carefully. "I've seen him before, not in person, but in pictures Weber's people had. They were studying them." Confirmation of his worst fear hit Robert hard. Edward was more than a colleague. He was someone Robert had trusted implicitly, had mentored, had even considered a friend. The betrayal stung on both professional and personal levels. "The question is why," Robert mused. "Edward is already wealthy, already successful. What could Weber offer that would be worth the risk?" "People do lots of things that don't make sense on paper," Lily observed with the wisdom of someone who had seen humanity's darker impulses firsthand. "Money, power, secrets. Sometimes people just want to feel important." Robert nodded, impressed again by her insight. "We need to understand the full extent of their connection before we make any moves. If Edward is compromised, there could be others." "So what do we do?" "We gather evidence," Robert said. "Carefully, methodically. We build a case so strong that even Weber's connections can't protect him. And we do it without alerting Edward or anyone else who might be involved." Lily considered this. "You'll need someone who can move around without being noticed. Someone Weber's people aren't looking for." "Absolutely not," Robert said firmly, realizing where she was headed. "You're staying safe out of sight." "I lived on the streets for over a year without getting caught," Lily countered. "I know how Weber's operation works from the inside. I can go places your security people can't." "You're 11 years old." "Almost 12, she corrected. "And I've been taking care of myself just fine." Robert shook his head. "It's too dangerous. I won't put you at risk." "I'm already at risk," Lily pointed out with irrefutable logic. "And I'm tired of hiding. I want to help." The determination in her eyes reminded Robert of himself as a young man, hungry for justice, unwilling to accept limitations imposed by others. Still, the thought of deliberately placing her in danger was unacceptable. "Let me think about it," he said finally. "No promises." Their conversation was interrupted by James's arrival. The security chief entered the room with the controlled urgency of someone bearing important news. "We have a situation," he announced without preamble. "Edward Blake has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. The stated purpose is to discuss concerns about your fitness to lead the company." "What?" Robert stood. "On what grounds?" "He's claiming erratic behavior, neglect of duties and potential compromise of company interests." James's expression was grim. "He has 3 board members already supporting him." "He's making his move," Lily said quietly, "trying to take control before you can expose him." Robert's mind raced through implications and options. Edward knew about the Technova acquisition, knew it would interfere with Weber's plans. With Robert removed from leadership, Edward could delay or cancel the deal entirely. "We don't have time for the careful approach anymore," Robert realized. "We need to counter this immediately." James nodded. "I've prepared a preliminary file on Edward's activities. Financial irregularities, unusual meetings, communications with known associates of Weber. It's not comprehensive, but it's enough to raise serious questions. Gather everything you have, Robert instructed, and arrange for extra security at the board meeting. If Edward is desperate enough to try this, there's no telling what else he might do. After James departed, Robert turned back to Lily, who had been silently observing the exchange. I need you to stay here tonight. Double security, no exceptions. What are you going to do? She asked. Prepare for battle, Robert replied grimly. Corporate warfare is bloodless but brutal. Edward has made a critical mistake. He's underestimated. How far I'll go to protect what matters? Lily studied him. This isn't just about your company anymore, is it? The question was perceptive, cutting through to the heart of what had changed in Robert's life since that snowy evening when a baseball bat had altered his destiny. No, he admitted, it's about something much more important. As he prepared to leave, Lily called after him. Mr. Mitchell? He turned back. Yes? Be careful, she said simply. Weber's people play dirty. So do I, Robert replied, when the stakes are high enough. Driving back to his penthouse through Boston's winter darkness, Robert felt a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The path forward was dangerous, filled with potential pitfalls, but for the first time in his adult life he was fighting for something beyond profit margins and market share. He was fighting for a future where children like Lily weren't forced to survive on society's margins, where power wasn't concentrated in the hands of men like Weber, who exploited vulnerability for personal gain, where wealth came with responsibility rather than immunity. Most of all, he was fighting for a girl who had saved his life with a broken baseball bat and unfathomable courage, a debt he could never truly repay, but would spend the rest of his life trying to honor. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, possibly catastrophe, but tonight Robert Mitchell began preparing for war. The Mitchell Innovations boardroom occupied the entire top floor of their headquarters, a glass and steel monument to Robert's vision. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Boston Harbor, though today the scenery went unappreciated as tension filled the air. Robert arrived early, a deliberate choice that allowed him to greet each board member individually as they entered. Handshakes, direct eye contact, subtle reminders of personal connections, small gestures that reinforced his position as leader. James had positioned additional security throughout the building, all wearing the standard Mitchell Innovations uniform, to avoid raising suspicion. Edward Blake arrived last, flanked by the 3 board members who supported his motion. His confident smile faltered slightly when he saw Robert already seated at the head of the table, appearing completely at ease. Robert, Edward nodded coolly. I appreciate you accommodating this meeting on such short notice. Of course, Robert replied pleasantly. Transparency is a core value of this company. Always has been. The loaded comment wasn't lost on Edward, whose jaw tightened momentarily before he took his seat. As the meeting began, Robert allowed Edward to present his case. Allegations of erratic behavior, cancelled meetings, mysterious absences, and purported evidence that Robert's judgment was compromised. The performance was convincing, delivered with the polished concern of someone reluctantly fulfilling an unpleasant duty. In summary, Edward concluded, I believe Robert's recent actions represent a danger to the stability and future of Mitchell Innovations. I move that he be temporarily relieved of his duties pending a full investigation. Murmurs rippled around the table as board members exchanged glances. Robert had built this company from nothing, turned it into a global powerhouse. The suggestion of removing him even temporarily was seismic. Thank you, Edward, Robert said calmly when the room quieted. Your concern for the company is noted. Before we vote on your motion, I'd like to present some information of my own. He nodded to his assistant, who distributed sealed folders to each board member. Please don't open these yet, Robert instructed. I want to provide context first. He stood, buttoning his jacket, a power move straight from his early days of pitching to skeptical investors. Edward is correct that I've been preoccupied recently. What he failed to mention is why. Robert clicked a remote, activating the room's display screens. A series of financial transactions appeared, highlighted and annotated. For the past 8 months, sensitive company information has been leaking to outside parties, he explained. Information that has cost us deals, damaged partnerships, and positioned competitors to anticipate our moves. I've been conducting a private investigation to identify the source. Edward shifted in his chair. Robert, this is... Please let me finish, Edward, Robert interrupted smoothly. What I discovered was deeply troubling. A senior executive has been receiving substantial payments through an elaborate network of shell companies. He clicked again, and new documents appeared on screen. Bank statements, property records, meeting logs. These payments coincide perfectly with major information leaks and strategic setbacks. But more concerning is who's behind them. Calvin Weber, a man whose business interests include real estate development, financial services, and various enterprises that operate in legal grey areas. Edward's face had gone pale. These accusations are preposterous. You can't possibly... You may open your folders now, Robert told the board members, ignoring Edward's interruption. Inside each folder was a comprehensive dossier detailing Edward's connection to Weber's organization, photographs of meetings, transcripts of calls, financial records showing millions flowing through carefully disguised channels. Edward isn't just leaking information, Robert continued as the board members processed the shocking evidence before them. He's actively working to undermine our acquisition of Technova because their East Boston property threatens Weber's control of certain operations in that neighborhood. The boardroom had gone deathly quiet. Edward's supporters were now staring at him with growing horror. This is a setup, Edward declared, but his voice lacked conviction. Robert is trying to distract from his own erratic behavior. My behavior has a simple explanation, Robert countered. I was attacked outside this building last week, an attack orchestrated by Weber's organization, designed to intimidate me into abandoning the Technova acquisition. Gasps echoed around the table. Robert had been careful to keep the incident quiet, knowing it would become public at the strategic moment of his choosing. You have no proof of that, Edward snapped, but sweat had begun to bead on his forehead. Actually, I do. Robert clicked the remote again. Security camera footage appeared, grainy but clear enough to show Robert being confronted near his car, the attacker's face visible in several frames. Facial recognition identified this man as Eric Donovan, a known associate of Weber. Phone records show 5 calls between Donovan and a burner phone purchased with a credit card connected to one of your shell companies, Edward. Edward stood abruptly, chair scraping, against the floor. This is ridiculous. I don't have to sit here and... Sit down. The command came not from Robert, but from Margaret Chen, the board's longest-serving member, and a respected venture capitalist known for her unerring ethical compass. We will hear this out completely. Edward sank back into his chair, defeated. Robert continued, voice steady. What Edward and Weber didn't anticipate was that someone would intervene during the attack, a witness who could identify Donovan and connect him to Weber's larger operation. He deliberately omitted Lily's identity and role, protecting her even now. This witness has provided crucial information about Weber's network, including how they recruit vulnerable individuals, particularly homeless youth, to gather intelligence, intimidate opponents, and maintain control over certain neighborhoods. The revelation sent another shockwave through the room. Several board members were visibly disturbed by the exploitation of children. I've spent the past week working with private security to document these activities and prepare evidence for proper authorities, Robert explained. That's the reason for my absences and changed schedule, not any lack of commitment to Mitchell Innovations, but rather an attempt to address a threat to both our company and our community. He turned directly to Edward. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Did Weber convince you that his protection was worth betraying everything we've built here? Edward's composure finally cracked. You don't understand what he's capable of, the connections he has, the power he wields. Once you're in his orbit, there's no walking away. There's always a choice, Robert replied evenly. You chose wrong. Margaret. Chen cleared her throat. I believe we've heard enough to render Edward's motion moot. Instead, I move that Edward Blake be immediately removed from his position and all company accounts, properties, and information systems. The vote was unanimous, including from Edward's former supporters, who now couldn't distance themselves quickly enough from the scandal. As security escorted a shell-shocked Edward from the building, Robert felt no satisfaction, only a hollow confirmation that his instincts had been correct and a renewed determination to finish what he'd started. The board meeting continued for another hour, with Robert providing additional details about Weber's operation and the steps being taken to protect the company. By the time it concluded, the directors had unanimously reaffirmed their support for Robert's leadership and authorized additional resources for security during this turbulent period. Margaret lingered after the others had departed. "There's more to this story than you're sharing," she observed, her keen eyes studying Robert's face. "Yes," he admitted. "Does it have anything to do with why you've been asking me about the legal complexities of guardianship recently?" Robert smiled, faintly. Margaret had always been perceptive. "It might." She nodded thoughtfully. "Whatever you're involved in, be careful. Men like Weber don't surrender easily." "I'm counting on that," Robert replied. Back in his office, Robert debriefed with James, who had monitored the entire meeting remotely. "Edward has been taken into custody by private security," James reported. "We've secured his devices and restricted his access. The question is, what happens next?" "Weber will realize something's wrong when Edward doesn't report in," Robert said. "He'll either retreat or escalate." "My money's on escalate," James frowned. "The Technova acquisition is scheduled to close in 3 days. If he wants to stop it, he's running out of time." Robert nodded grimly. "Which means we need to move faster than planned. Is everything in place for Phase 2? "Almost. We still need one key piece of evidence linking Weber directly to the exploitation of minors. Without that, authorities might not act quickly enough." Robert considered this. Lily mentioned documentation, photos Weber's people kept of potential targets, including children they were recruiting. She knew where some of their meeting locations were. "You're not suggesting we use her information," James said, alarmed. "That would put her at even greater risk." "No," Robert agreed, "but she might know someone else who could help, another child who has access but hasn't been as careful about staying invisible." James looked troubled. "Robert, these are children. Using them as informants—" "Not using," Robert corrected firmly. "Protecting, offering a way out. But you're right, we need another approach." He thought for a moment. What if we create an opportunity too tempting for Weber to ignore, something that would force him to show his hand? "What did you have in mind?" "A public announcement. Mitchell Innovations is launching a major community initiative focused on youth homelessness in Boston, comprehensive services, housing, education, and a partnership with law enforcement to identify and prosecute those who exploit vulnerable children." James caught on immediately. "We position it as completely separate from the Technova deal, a philanthropic effort you've been developing for months." "Exactly. Weber will see it as a direct threat to his recruitment pipeline. He'll have to respond." "It's risky," James warned. "You'll be painting an even bigger target on yourself." "I'm counting on it," Robert said, "but this time, we'll be ready." The announcement went out that afternoon, a press release, social media campaign, and personal statement from Robert about Mitchell Innovations' commitment to addressing youth homelessness in Boston. The response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. City officials, social service organizations, and community leaders praised the initiative, offering partnerships and support. Robert spent the evening at the Cambridge Safe House with Lily, explaining the day's events and the strategy moving forward. "You really exposed Edward in front of everyone?" Lily asked, impressed despite herself. "It was necessary," Robert explained. "Removing him weakens Weber's position and protects our acquisition. But it's just the first step." "What's the next one?" Robert showed her the press release about the youth initiative. "This is about more than just strategy now, it's about creating lasting change." Lily read it carefully, expression unreadable. "This is real, not just a trap for Weber." "It's absolutely real," Robert assured her. "Whether we succeed against Weber or not, this program will continue. No child should have to live the way you've been living, Lily." She was quiet for a long moment, fingers tracing the words on the tablet screen. "What happens to me when this is over?" The question cut to the heart of what Robert had been considering since their paths had crossed. "That depends partly on what you want," he said carefully. "There are options we can discuss." Before Lily could respond, James entered the room, his expression grave. "We've got movement. Weber's calling an emergency meeting of his lieutenants tonight. Our source says he's furious about both Edward's removal and the youth initiative announcement." "Where's the meeting?" Robert asked. "A restaurant in the North End, supposedly closed for a private event." "Perfect," Robert said. "Alert the team." "We move tonight." "What's happening?" Lily asked, looking between them. Robert knelt to her eye level. "We're setting our trap. Weber thinks he's gathering his people to plan a countermove, but he's actually walking into a carefully prepared operation." "With police?" Lily asked skeptically. "No," Robert said. "Not yet. First, we need irrefutable evidence, the kind that even Weber's connections can't dismiss. We'll have surveillance teams documenting everything, gathering the final pieces we need. And then? Then we take everything to people I trust in federal law enforcement, not local authorities who might be compromised. Weber's operation crosses state lines, which gives federal agencies jurisdiction. Lily considered this. "It might work," she conceded, "if your people are as good as you think they are." "They are," Robert assured her, "and after tonight, you won't have to hide anymore." As he prepared to leave, Lily called after him. "Mr. Mitchell." He turned back. "Yes?" "Be careful," she said simply. The same warning she'd given before, but this time Robert heard the unspoken emotion behind it, the fear of someone who had already lost too much, who couldn't bear to lose one more person who mattered. "I will," he promised. "And Lily, when this is over, we're going to have a long talk about your future." As Robert headed into the Boston night, he felt a resolve unlike anything he'd experienced in his business career. Tonight would determine not just the fate of his company's acquisition or Weber's criminal enterprise, but something far more personal, the future of a remarkable child who had saved his life in more ways than one. Spring came early to Boston that year. As March surrendered to April, cherry blossoms erupted along Commonwealth Avenue, and the public garden awakened with vibrant colors that seemed impossible after the harsh winter. For Robert Mitchell, the changing season mirrored the transformation in his own life, a rebirth he could never have anticipated 3 months earlier. Standing at the window of his penthouse, coffee in hand, he watched the morning light dance across the harbor. Behind him, the television murmured quietly, a news anchor recounting the latest developments in what the media had dubbed the Weber investigation. Federal authorities announced additional charges yesterday against Calvin Weber and 5 associates, the reporter explained. As footage showed Weber being escorted into a courthouse, his once imposing presence diminished by an orange jumpsuit. The expanded indictment includes racketeering, money laundering, and multiple counts of child exploitation. Sources close to the investigation credit an anonymous whistleblower and cooperation from Mitchell Innovations CEO Robert Mitchell for breaking the case open. Robert muted the television. The anonymous whistleblower was, of course, a carefully constructed narrative designed to protect Lily and the other children who had provided crucial testimony. The full truth of that night in the North End restaurant would remain known only to those directly involved. How James's team had captured damning evidence as Weber berated his lieutenants for losing control of their operation. How Robert had personally confronted Weber before federal agents moved in, and how the subsequent investigation had revealed networks of exploitation far more extensive than anyone had imagined. The door to the guest bedroom opened, and Lily emerged, yawning. 3 months of regular meals, safety, and stability had worked subtle changes in her appearance. Her face had softened, losing the sharp angles of hunger. Her hair, now properly cut and cared for, hung in golden waves past her shoulders. Most striking was the change in her eyes, still watchful, still intelligent, but no longer haunted by constant fear. "You're up early," Robert observed, pouring her a glass of orange juice. "Math competition today," she reminded him, accepting the juice. "Ms. Abernathy is picking me up at 8. The mention of Lily's teacher brought a smile to Robert's face. Catherine Abernathy, who taught accelerated mathematics at the prestigious Gardner Academy, had taken a special interest in Lily since her enrollment 2 months ago. The school had initially been reluctant to accept a student mid-year, especially one with no formal education records, but Lily's performance on their entrance exams had shattered all doubts. She was now working 3 grade levels ahead in mathematics and showing similar potential in sciences. "Nervous?" Robert asked. Lily shrugged, but her fingers tapped rapidly against the glass, a tell he'd come to recognize. "A little. The other kids have been competing since elementary school, and none of them can calculate prime factorizations in their head like you can," Robert reminded her. "You've got this." The casual confidence in his voice seemed to steady her. Their relationship had evolved gradually over the past months, from rescuer and rescued to something more complex and meaningful. The legal aspects had been challenging, as Margaret Chen had warned, but Robert's resources and determination had overcome each obstacle. With help from specialized attorneys and child welfare advocates, he had obtained temporary guardianship of Lily while the search for her father continued. Given the circumstances of her abandonment and her father's complete absence during her 14 months on the streets, the courts had been sympathetic to their case. The path to permanent adoption remained complex, but Robert was committed to seeing it through no matter how long it took. "The blue folder or the red one?" Lily asked, interrupting his thoughts as she held up 2 identical competition portfolios. "Blue matches your eyes," Robert replied, earning an eye roll that was becoming increasingly typical of Lily's emerging preteen personality, a development he secretly delighted in. Normal adolescent attitudes meant healing, meant trust, meant she felt secure enough to push boundaries. As they ate breakfast together, Robert marveled at how quickly routine had established itself in their lives. Morning rituals, school schedules, evening homework sessions. The rhythms of family life that had once seemed as foreign to him as they must have to Lily. Both of them were learning as they went, making mistakes, adjusting expectations. There had been difficult moments, nightmares that left Lily screaming in terror, days when she retreated into herself, overwhelmed by the adjustment to her new life. Robert had responded not with the efficiency that marked his business dealings, but with patience, with presence, with the simple assurance that she wasn't alone anymore. The doorbell rang at precisely 8 o'clock. Lily gathered her competition materials while Robert greeted Catherine Abernathy, a formidable woman in her 50s, whose stern exterior masked a passionate advocate for gifted children. "She's been practicing problems until midnight," Robert informed Catherine quietly. "I finally had to confiscate her textbook." Catherine's expression softened. Dedication like hers is rare, but so is her natural ability. The university professors judging today's competition are in for quite a surprise. As Lily emerged from her room, backpack slung over one shoulder in studied casualness, Robert felt the now familiar surge of pride and concern that seemed to define parenthood. "Remember," he told her, straightening her collar, "it's just a competition. Win or lose, I'm proud of you." I know," Lily said, but her quick hug before departing betrayed her appreciation for the reassurance. After they left, Robert prepared for his own day. The Technova acquisition had closed successfully, despite Weber's attempts to derail it. The company's East Boston property was now being transformed not into luxury apartments as originally planned, but into a comprehensive youth center, the flagship of Mitchell Innovations' community initiative. The program had expanded rapidly, fueled by Robert's personal investment and the company's resources. In just 3 months, they had established emergency housing for 50 homeless youth, developed educational partnerships with local schools, and created pathways to employment for older teens. Social workers, counselors, and mentors worked together to address the complex needs of children who, like Lily, had fallen through society's cracks. Robert's phone rang. James Wilson, calling with his weekly security update. "Everything quiet on our end," James reported. "Weber's remaining associates have gone to ground. His organization is effectively dismantled." "And Donovan?" Robert asked, referring to the man who had attacked him that snowy night. "Still cooperating with authorities in exchange for leniency. His testimony has been instrumental in connecting Weber to at least 3 other criminal enterprises." "Good," Robert said. "Keep me updated if anything changes." After ending the call, Robert gathered his things for the office. Though his schedule remained demanding, he had implemented significant changes in how he worked. No more 14-hour days, no more missed dinners. Lily's presence in his life had forced a recalibration of priorities that, surprisingly, had made him more effective rather than less. Focus, efficiency, delegation. Skills he had always possessed but now employed with new purpose. His executive team had adapted to the transformation in their CEO with varying degrees of acceptance. Some embraced the company's expanded social mission, seeing both the moral imperative and the business advantages of community engagement. Others remained skeptical, though none dared voice their concerns directly. The board, led by Margaret Chen's unwavering support, had fully endorsed Robert's new vision. The afternoon found Robert at the East Boston Youth Center construction site. Hard-hatted and mud-booted, he walked the perimeter with the project manager, reviewing progress and discussing timeline adjustments. The center would include dormitory-style emergency housing, classrooms, counseling offices, recreational facilities, and a technology hub where Mitchell Innovations employees would offer mentorship and training. "We're still on schedule for a July opening," the manager confirmed. "The weather's been cooperating." "Excellent," Robert replied. "And the security systems?" "State-of-the-art, just as you specified. No one gets in or out without proper clearance." The emphasis on security wasn't just precautionary. Despite Weber's incarceration, Robert remained vigilant. The man had connections, resources that hadn't been fully mapped. Until every branch of his operation was identified and neutralized, Robert wouldn't take chances. Not with the vulnerable youth who would inhabit this space, and certainly not with Lily. His phone vibrated with a text message from Catherine. "Abernathy. First round complete. Lily perfect score. Moving to finals." Robert smiled, tapping out a quick reply of congratulations before returning to the site inspection. By the time he finished at the construction site, another update had arrived. "Finals complete. Results this afternoon. She was brilliant." The pride that swelled in his chest felt different from any business accomplishment. Deeper, more personal, untethered from metrics of success he'd used his entire adult life. Late that afternoon, as Robert worked in his home office, the elevator announced a visitor. Moments later, Lily burst through the door waving a blue ribbon and certificate. "First place!" she exclaimed, her usual reserve momentarily forgotten in the excitement of victory. "And I've been invited to join the state team for nationals." Robert lifted her in a celebratory hug, something that would have been unimaginable 3 months ago. "I knew you could do it. Tell me everything." For the next hour, Lily recounted the competition in meticulous detail, the problems she'd solved, the strategies she'd employed, the moment of realization when she'd found an elegant solution to the final challenge. Her animation, her unguarded enthusiasm, represented the greatest victory of all, a child finally free to simply be a child. As evening settled over Boston, they sat together on the penthouse balcony, watching stars emerge above the city lights. Robert had ordered Lily's favorite meal to celebrate her victory, chicken parmesan from the North End restaurant that had become their special occasion tradition. "I have some news too," Robert said as they finished dinner. "The final paperwork for your enrollment at the Gardner Academy's Summer Science program came through today. You're officially registered for all the courses you wanted." Lily's eyes widened. "Even the advanced robotics lab?" "Even that," Robert confirmed, "though they mentioned you'll be the youngest student they've ever accepted." "That just means I have to work harder," Lily replied with characteristic determination. "It means you have extraordinary gifts," Robert corrected gently. "Gifts that deserve nurturing." Lily pushed her food around her plate, suddenly pensive. "Do you think she would be proud?" "My grandmother." The question caught Robert off guard. Lily rarely spoke of her past. "From everything you've told me about her, I have no doubt she would be immensely proud." "I still miss her sometimes," Lily admitted quietly. "Is that okay? Even though I have." "This now?" She gestured vaguely at their surroundings, at the life they were building together. "Of course it is," Robert assured her. "Love isn't finite, Lily. Carrying her memory doesn't diminish what we're creating here." She nodded, absorbing this. "The social worker asked me again yesterday if I want to find my dad." Another difficult subject, approached carefully. "And what did you tell her?" "That I already found the family I need." Her voice was small but certain. The simple declaration struck Robert with unexpected force. All his accomplishments, the company he'd built, the fortune he'd amassed, the innovations he'd pioneered, paled in comparison to what those words represented. Their child who had lost everything, who had survived unimaginable hardship, was choosing to trust again, was choosing him. "The adoption hearing is next month," he reminded her. "It's still a long process, but Judge Winters seems supportive of our case." "And if they say no?" The question revealed the lingering fear beneath Lily's growing confidence, the fear that this new life could be taken from her as suddenly as her old one had been. "Then we keep fighting," Robert promised. "Together. I'm not giving up, Lily, not ever." The certainty in his voice seemed to reassure her. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness enveloped the city, each lost in private thoughts, yet connected by the unspoken understanding that had grown between them. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Robert returned to the balcony alone. The baseball bat that had saved his life now held a place of honor in his office, preserved in a custom display case, not as a reminder of danger escaped, but of courage demonstrated. Of a child who had nothing yet gave everything. His phone buzzed with an email from Margaret Chen containing the latest financial projections for Mitchell Innovations. The numbers were exceptional: record growth, expanding market share, unprecedented investor interest. The company's social initiatives, far from damaging the bottom line as some had predicted, had enhanced their reputation and attracted new partnerships. But as Robert skimmed the report, he found himself more concerned with a different set of figures: Lily's competition scores, her recent growth measurements at the pediatrician, the steadily increasing duration of her nightmare-free nights. These were the metrics that mattered now. 3 months ago, he had been a successful man by every conventional measure, wealthy, powerful, respected. Yet he had walked through life isolated, disconnected from the very humanity his technology supposedly served. It had taken a homeless child with a broken baseball bat to show him what truly mattered: courage, compassion, connection. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had spent his career creating innovations that changed how people lived, yet Lily had been the one to truly innovate his life. To transform it completely with nothing but her inherent goodness and extraordinary resilience. As spring blossoms opened across Boston, so too had a new chapter begun for both of them. The past couldn't be erased. Its shadows would always linger. In Lily's watchful gaze, in her occasional nightmares, in her remarkable self-reliance. But the future stretched before them with possibilities neither could have imagined during that chance encounter on a snowy street corner. Robert Mitchell, who had built an empire by seeing potential where others saw only problems, now applied that same vision to his most important project, creating a family from the broken pieces of 2 solitary lives. And Lily Thompson, who had survived by calculating odds and anticipating dangers, was slowly learning to trust that some equations balanced perfectly the first time. Together they were writing a new algorithm for family, one defined not by blood or circumstance, but by choice, by courage, by love that arrived unexpectedly and changed everything. In the quiet darkness of a Boston spring night, as his daughter slept peacefully down the hall, Robert Mitchell finally understood the true meaning of innovation, the courage to begin again, to rewrite the rules, to create something enduring from unlikely beginnings. Some called it chance, this crossing of paths between a homeless child and a billionaire. But Robert knew better. In the vast complexity of human existence, some connections were inevitable, magnetized by something deeper than logic, more powerful than probability. Not chance, but destiny. Not luck, but purpose. And in that purpose, both had found what they needed most, not just rescue, but redemption.